Okay, let's see if everything's working right. I don't know yet. Test, 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 check, check, check. It appears that it is. All right, well, let me go ahead and explain to you guys what's going on. Okay, first things first, you know that we're visiting David in Brooklyn to see Colt, and so we're here in New York. Well, things have gotten a little bit interesting back home. We got a sick calf, and we're trying to shuffle some things around to figure out how to maybe get her to a veterinarian. Prep sitter Bob is there, and and there's some other things that are going on. Of course, nothing can go smooth, right? And so we're trying to figure out some money situation for that. But So that necessitated me having to make this devotion earlier in the day and then release it when you're seeing it. That way, I could try to explain everything that's going on. Because tomorrow is what? Tomorrow's Thursday. I don't even know. But I'll try to do the same thing again tomorrow, and maybe even for Friday, and then Monday, Lord willing, we'll all be back on the schedule. So prayers for us, and I'm gonna read and give you my notes and everything. So hopefully, I know it's not the same thing as being live, but hopefully it'll still be a blessing to you guys. So prayers for us, if you don't mind, trying to figure out some money issue with the possible need for a vet in our absence from Buttercup, the cow, and well, yeah, and just general mayhem. Prayers for that. So okay, we are going to jump right on in. I'm going to start reading, guys, and we're going to be again in Second Samuel, and we are going to come to the end of the line. The end of the line for this rebellion. So we're going to start reading in chapter 18 of Second Samuel. And we're going to start in verse 19 and we're going to go through 33. So now where we're at, if you remember correctly, is Joab has basically ended the rebellion. They found Absalom hanging from a tree. His thick curly hair had him caught. And Joab gave the order. Well, he stabbed him with some javelins. There's that. And then he also ordered that everybody, his armor bearers, take him out. And then, insult to injury, they threw him in a pit and covered him in rocks. And it was basically a slap in the face to King David, and it completely undermined his authority and also showed a lack of respect and also a lack of fear of the king. So Joab was kind of like, whatever, dude. Hey, enjoy. Hey, I stopped the rebellion and you're doing nothing about it. So we're going to start at verse 19. Ahimaaz. Okay, then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, let me run and carry the news to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies. And Joab said to him, you are not to carry the news today. You may carry news another day, but today you shall carry no news because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to the Cushite, go tell the king what you have seen. Then the Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said again to Joab, come what may, let me also run after the Cushite. And Joab said, why will you run, my son, seeing that you will have no reward for the news? Come what may, he said, I will run. So he said to him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Cushite. Now David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up on the roof of the gate by the wall. And when he lifted up his eyes and looked, he saw a man running alone. The watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, if he is alone, there is news in his mouth. And he drew nearer and nearer, and the watchman saw the man running. And the watchman called to the gate and said, see, another man running alone. The king said, he also brings news. The watchman said, I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz the son of Zadok. And the king said, he is a good man, and comes with good news. Then Ahimaaz cried out to the king, "All is well." And he bowed before the king with his face to the earth and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." And the king said, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" Ahimaaz answered, "When Joab sent the king's servant, your servant, I saw a great commotion, but I do not know what it was." And the king said, "Turn aside and stand here." So he turned aside and stood still. And behold, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, "Good news for my lord the king, for the Lord has delivered you this day from the hand of all who rose up against you." The king said to the Cushite, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you for evil be like that young man." And the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son Absalom." Okay. Now, a couple things right out of the gate, right off the bat. Verse 20. This is an interesting exchange with Joab. Remember how I was saying yesterday, and it's kind of been building, that Joab is truly dedicated to Israel. His job is he views himself as a chief and commander over Israel, even more so than to his dedication to the king. See, while the king is doing the will of Israel, then Joab is right there with him, tracking. But when he's not, he can be a downright nasty skunk. Like, for example, he killed Absalom. He did it. Why? It was in the best interest of Israel. Now, you may argue, and I might be inclined to agree with you, that generally those interests of Israel and supporting Israel would have lined up with his own personal interests as well. I would agree with that. However, just kind of keep that in the back of your head, because things are going to get even more interesting coming up here in the near future. So, you've got Joab and Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. Remember that guy? Who's he? He happens to be the high priest's son. He happens to be one of the ones that stayed behind with the ark. He happens to be one of David's spies, if you remember. So, totally on the side of David, totally right there. But now you've got this exchange where Ahimaaz, the high priest's son, spy of David, happens to be there, knows everything that's going on, knows the battle's over, knows that Absalom is dead, and he requests permission of Joab to go and tell David the news. Now, why is this interesting? Because, first of all, Absalom does not allow him. He's like, no, trust me, dude. Bad day. You're excited. Good for you. You want to bring David the good news, except you don't know he's not going to think it's very good news. He doesn't tell him that. But he knows. I mean, think about it like this. Well, I'm going to come to that in a second. You don't know where I'm going just yet. However, but Joab is basically saying, Ahimaaz, look, I know you're excited. We're glad that the rebellion's over. Trust me on this. You're not going to want to run. You're not going to want to go tell him his son's dead, even though he's a traitor, even though he's led the rebellion, all of these things, conspirator, he was trying to kill his dad, the whole 9 yards. Trust me, you don't want to do it. And so then what's he do? Joab basically says, hey, you, Cushite, over here, start running. Tell him what you see. And in a way, it's kind of like Joab was protecting Ahimaaz. Because think about it. In the past, when David has gotten bad news, it has not gone so well for the messenger who was, just trying to to get favor with the king, or was trying to gloat over something. To be the messenger of somebody, he's basically done a lot worse things to less bad messengers and messages than the death of his son. So Joab's kind of like, not you, Ahimaaz. You, come here, Cushite. And he's like, I don't care about the Cushite. Just come on, come on. And but Ahimaaz decides he's going to do it anyway, and he says, "Come what may, let me run also." And he has this little mini argument with him, and he ultimately ends up letting him go. But now it's an interesting thing here that Joab is such a complex character when you think about it, because there are days when he's a total rock star, totally, does the right thing, period, end of story. Even times when he's protecting David against himself. Times when he's giving David credit for battles that Joab won so that the king would look good. Once again, I think I'm leaning towards the idea that it was twofold. He had his own self-interest in mind, but also he truly wanted what was right for Israel, even if it went against what David wanted or did or didn't do. Okay? Follow me? Which would make sense with this display of what in the world is, why is, like, sometimes he just killed Absalom and now he's like trying to save this other guy? Huh? It kind of lines up when you frame it in that self-preservation, position of power, money, plus he wanted what was best for David, even if it, or Israel, even if it was not lined up with what David wanted. So now let me see my notes. Yeah, Joab is basically trying to avoid any negative outcome to Ahimaaz, the high priest's son, don't forget, faithful to the crown. He's faithful to David. And David has executed messengers with less bad news than this in the past. And, okay, now, skip it on down to verse 25. This is an interesting thing. This is just one of those things that it sticks out, that it's not pivotal to the story, but these are the kind of things that can add spice and add zest to an understanding of these passages. And if we read verse 24, as David was sitting between the two gates, the watchman went up to the roof of the gate by the wall, and when he lifted up his eyes, he saw a man running alone. The word alone was important, and it gets repeated. The watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, if he is alone, there is news in his mouth. Now, why alone? Why is that even something that I'll go, paying attention? Well, if he's running alone, it's either really good news or really bad news. Because if the army's not with him, then either there was some tragic loss and the information needs to get to the king as fast as possible, or there was some incredible victory and they're pressing forward or they're doing something. So in my mind, when you see stuff like that in scripture, they're giving you a descriptor of how this must have affected the participants in the account. So he was running alone. So the king saw this guy coming and he's like, uh-oh, this could either be really good news or really bad news, but nobody runs around here alone unless there's some major news to be had. So now he gets the news of the what happened. Ahimaaz at first, and then when you can see from verse 28 to verse 30, you can see that Ahimaaz is going, uh-oh, I'm just going to go ahead and not tell you much anymore. He starts to say it. He starts to say, hey, blessed be the Lord your God who's delivered up the men who raised their hand against my Lord. And the king said, what's he say? Is it well with the young man Absalom? Ahimaaz answered, Well, when Joab sent the king's servant, your servant, me, I saw great commotion, but I did not know what it was. So he's like, oh, corrupt. Oh, no. I just stepped in it. And when he realizes what he had done, he kind of clams up, and then lo and behold, the Cushite shows up. So maybe this was God's way of giving mercy to Ahimaaz, who had been faithful. He had done nothing wrong. He served the king, even though it was his own neck on the chopping block for being a spy for David. He didn't do anything wrong. Maybe this was God's way of sparing Ahimaaz. Maybe. Maybe this was God's way of, in a way, softening the blow to David. Because you can say a lot of things about David, and he has been a lot of things. Hero, villain. He's been a lot of things. But one thing that keeps coming back up is that God says he's a man after his own heart. And that means that God still loves David. Period. Still loves him. So even though there is wrath coming, even though it's already happening, even though it's already been happening for a while, and there's still more payment for the sins that he's committed to be paid, but maybe this is God's way of going, are you paying attention now? Hey, McFly, hey, you paying attention now? Remember all that junk you did back there? This is just partial payment. So, this is just partial payment. Now, as they continue forward, this is my final thought. And hopefully, I'm seeing that YouTube is doing something funny, so hopefully it didn't stop. But here's my thought in summing this chapter up, or this paragraph. First, David lost the respect and loyalty of his son. In this particular scene, he loses his respect and his loyalty. Then Absalom becomes an enemy. Not only did he lose respect, then Absalom becomes an enemy and leads a rebellion intent on killing David. Then Absalom dies. Then it's clear at this point that David has lost 100% touch with his army's leadership and his army. He's out of touch. They don't trust him. There's no faith in his leadership anymore. He's in the process of losing so much and so much more to come. And I kind of get the impression that it's now that David is starting to go, oh man, oh no, in that cry about his son, oh Absalom, my son. And but there's still more to come. There's still more good David, and there's still more payment to be had. And so, with that, I'm going to say goodbye for today. Don't forget, tomorrow I'm going to try to do something similar with this, and then again on Friday, we'll try to figure out what's going on with the cow. But anyway, prayers for each other. Please don't forget that. Prayers for you guys. And, well, thank you for your prayers for us, because even in getting away, it seems like there's always a million things. So, all right, guys, you have an amazing and blessed day. All right, bye. Turn this.